Good evening, Unisa students, colleagues from Unisa and Higher Health. A warm welcome to the third day of the Peer Educators Training. My name is Tebogo Mangope from the Office of the Dean of Students. I will now hand over to Ntate Nkuna to share with us the guidelines of the training before we proceed. Over to you, Ntate Nkuna.
Thank you so much, Memangope. Good evening, colleagues from Unisa and from Higher Health, and our most important stakeholders, our students. As I'm going through the presentation now, please give me a sec to upload the presentation. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the following guidelines will be for the duration of the training. Students are 100% responsible for their learning and input on the peer educator health and wellness program. All students must attend 100% of the sessions from the 14th until the 18th of July 2025. The focus will only be on the training. No other related matters can be discussed or asked by participants in the comment section. Have fun while you are learning. Embrace a willingness to learn and grow, not only for your personal development, but also for the benefit of your peers or the community you are coming from. Be kind to yourself and others participating in the training. All practical implementations requirements must be adhered to confidentiality. Engage in extensive reading to broaden your knowledge and expand your intellectual horizon. If any queries, please do not hesitate to contact us at studenthealth@unisa.ac.za. With these few words, I'd like to thank you all. Over to you, Mema Ngope.
Thank you so much, Ntate Nkuna. And also, I would like to express my heart appreciation to all participants for their active engagement through the chat and emails. We truly value your contribution. Thank you so much. And on that, there is a slight adjustment to the program. And then Ms. Matsebula will also provide you with information why there's a slight adjustment to the program, because today is the mental health, which will explain why we have included substance abuse. Will provide you with that. On that note, I will hand over to Ms. Matsebula from Higher Health, who is the counseling psychologist. Thank you so much. Over to you, Ms. Matsebula.
Good evening, all. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. If I can just get my presentation open. And first and foremost, the program, to discuss the program for today. I think the program that I have shared on my end spoke to gender-based violence and mental health. Please correct me if I am wrong. So what I've done, I've adjusted the topics to speak to one another, just to make it more palatable as we're talking about it and as we engage, so that there isn't a disjoint. So today we will be covering gender-based violence, disability, sexual and gender diversity, right? All these topics encompass one another. And feel free to engage. Usually I start my sessions by, describing that this isn't a psychology one-on-one lecture. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to engage in a conversation. I'm here to put thought-provoking matters into the mind, to channel you to think outside of the box. I think all of us that are here in our student capacities are peer educators. So you're supposed to take the knowledge, decode it, make sense of it, make meaning of it, so that you can assist your student population. All right, can I just get indication if I can present and project on my end?
Yes, you can go ahead, me.
Okay. G does not beat me today. Let's see, window. Okay, and just before I project, I wanted to get from your end if I'm able to engage with the students as we go on with the presentation, or if you would like me to wait till the end. I see their mics have been disconnected. Does this mean that the students cannot answer any participatory questions as the presentation goes?
What we do is that they drop their chart on the chat site, and then after that we are able to read it to you, and then after each presentation we go to questions and then ask a few questions before we proceed to another presentation.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so I do have a few interactive slides. I guess we will look into the chat box to answer some of the questions as the presentation goes. On my end, as soon as I present, I cannot see the chat box, so you will assist me. All right, so as mentioned, my name is Sphiwe Matsebula. I am a counseling psychologist from Higher Health, working very well with Unisa. So I'm happy to be here tonight to share and impart some of my expertise. As I've mentioned, we will be speaking on topics of disability, sexual and gender diversity, as well as gender-based violence. Sorry, can I just get it into presenter view? There we go. All right, so starting with the first topic on disability. If we look at this picture, what disabilities come to mind? Feel free to text it in the chat box so I can get an understanding if we're on the same page. How are we thinking about these things? So just by looking at this image, what are some of the disabilities that we can identify?
A blind disability.
Okay.
Physical disabilities, mobility, visual impairment, or blind. Autism.
Okay.
Mental disability, physical disability.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we're thinking in the right channel, right? When I look at this picture, you know, I see somebody in a wheelchair, I see somebody walking on crutches, I see somebody using a guide dog, I see somebody who has stilts on the leg, right? So we're speaking to different disabilities. So we speak to physical disabilities. You know, this condition affects mobility, such as paralysis, amputation, depicted in this picture. We also have sensory disabilities, so that's impairments related to our sight, hearing, speech, right? And another category is cognitive disabilities. These are disabilities sometimes that we cannot see, right? So this is challenges with our thinking, with our learning, and sometimes our memory. And then we have mental conditions. So this is conditions such as depression, anxiety that affect our emotional and mental well-being. So let's describe what disability really is. Let's go straight into the definition, right? So when we're talking about disability, we are talking to a condition that limits a person's physical, mental, or cognitive abilities, right? But there's two ways to it, right? And how I will describe it to you is that there's a disability that exists by biology, right? Either you were born that way or something has happened, an injury that has now caused you to be limited in terms of your physical, mental, or cognitive abilities, right? And then we get our environmental, right? This speaks to the part where I'm saying active limitations and participation restrictions, right? We're speaking to our environment. So sometimes I have a condition that does limit me. Maybe I have visual impairment, right? I have visual impairment. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily blind. That means I wear spectacles and maybe I cannot see, right? Maybe I have color blindness as well. Does the environment allow and include, is there inclusivity for me, right? So that are the two parts that we speak to when we speak about disability. But let's just unpack the definition. So disability refers to a condition that limits a person's physical, mental, or cognitive abilities. This impairs them from the ability to perform their certain tasks or participate fully in society, right? So disability is a broad term that encompasses impairments. Remember, we've spoken to disabilities such as physical, sensory, cognitive, and mental health conditions. Are we still on the same page? Just a thumbs up in the comment section so we know we're all good. All right, and then when we look at the key aspects of disability, we're looking to things like the impairments, right? Problems with the body structure or functioning, like a spinal cord injury, as we've mentioned, some injuries, vision impairments, right? So we must take note that there's impairments, activity limitations, participation restrictions, and interactions with the environments. So when we think about it in the context of us as students, we have students that we are with in our spaces that have functioning problems, right? So walking disabilities, communicating disabilities, right? Interacting with our environment, right? So I may be in a position where I am disabled, but I am able to participate in my environment, or maybe I'm in a position where I'm disabled and I can't participate in this environment. So these are the key aspects to think to, right? And when we talk about the inequalities, we speak to things like diversity of experiences, right? So individuals come with disabilities from diverse experiences shaped by various factors like their sex, their gender identity, and socioeconomic status. So what we're saying in essence here is just because we both wear glasses doesn't mean our context is the same, right? Just because I have I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean our circumstances are the same, right? So when we also speak to other inequalities, we speak about social and environmental factors. So this is what I've discussed shortly, that there are barriers in our environment that enable those with disabilities to function. I think I see a hand. I can stop for a few and we can attend the hand.
No, please note that we don't take hands at the moment. As I've said, that it's more on the chart, and then we will attend to that when you are done with the presentation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no please problem. Continue and then ignore the hands.
Thank you. All right, so we're highlighting that sometimes we're in the context of having a disability, however, our environment may exacerbate the impact of this disability, right? So it's very important for us to distinguish whether somebody is characterized as having a disability or whether the environment is exacerbating this disability. So if I can give a practical example, is somebody may be in a wheelchair, consider themselves as having a disability, however they are functioning. They're able to function around within the environment because there are ramps, there are elevators that are accessible for them to use, facilities, right? And then when we speak to other inequality considerations, we speak to human rights, right? People with disabilities have rights too. They are full and active members of society and have equal rights, just like me and you. Okay? And that brings us to being considerate in terms of our language. So the way that we speak, right? This is an important factor because somebody living with a disability does not make them less of, right? So in general, we use a person first approach. This means you speak to the person and then the disability, right? So you're not going to say they are a disabled then person. So you'd say a person with a disability. And remember, we've said it's all encompassing. So when you speak to somebody or referencing somebody, you don't have to say a person with a disability who cannot walk, right? You've already encompassed it well, and that's enough, right? Remember, the term person with disability often is used to encompass, right, with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments. So what we're saying is we don't have to nitpick, at the disability that the person has, because we're not trying to make them feel less of, right? We want an inclusive society where even those living with disabilities feel like they're a part of and an active member of society. So that speaks to the idea of respect, right? Respecting an individual's preferences. Usually, if we're speaking outside the context of disability, you'd usually ask a person their comfort, right? So why aren't we affording those living with disabilities the same comfort, right? So what we're saying in essence is ask them how they prefer to be addressed, right? They're human as well. You ask and you include, right? Avoid negative or stereotypical language, right? So we're not going to victimize the person. We're not going to pity them. So things like shame a person in a wheelchair, right? That's implying pity on them, right? A person who can't stand up tall like me, that's inferiority, right? So we're going to speak to language that is respectful and inclusive of everybody, right? And then the next point, focusing on the person and not the disability. Remember, when we're speaking to whatever we're speaking to, assisting somebody with a disability, it doesn't necessarily matter what the challenge is, right? Remember, the context always comes after. You can use the whole encompassing term to get them the assistance that they need. You can use the whole encompassing term to get your point across, right? Being mindful of your tone as well, right? Even outside the context of disability, when you speak to somebody, you don't want to use a patronizing tone where you're making somebody feel small or making feel somebody like they don't understand or they're stupid, right? So we're going to be mindful of the way that we speak to them. And then using neutral and objective language. This is something that I've already spoken to. We're not going to stigmatize them. We're not going to describe them in ways that are rude or have innuendos of disrespect, right? And the biggest highlight that I've taken from in terms of respect is when in doubt, you ask, right? It doesn't hurt to ask. You'll always do better in asking than thinking for the next person. Okay, so that covers the topic of disability in a neatly packed way. However, I want us to keep in mind what we've discussed as we go through this whole presentation, because be mindful, I said these enmesh and they encompass one another. So without rambling too much, we'll go into the topic of gender and sexual sorry, I think my slides have... Are we still seeing my slides on your end? Mine have disappeared. Uh-oh.
Yes, we do.
And with regards to disability, we only have few questions.
Okay, sorry, I am just trying to get my presenter view back up. Okay, there we go. Okay, we can take questions.
Yeah, the first one, it says that if you can't spell the letter, the letter R, is that a disability?
If you can't spell or say, if you can't articulate the
Yeah,
letter
you can't
R.
articulate the letter. At least assist there.
Okay, so not necessarily. Remember, when we speak to how we speak and how we pronounce things, that just speaks to, the tongue, right? Some tongues are longer than others, some tongues are shorter than others. And I won't speak because that is more on the medical side, but it depends on how it is restricting you, right? Just because you can't say the letter rain doesn't mean you're somebody with a disability. Maybe you may have a speech impediment, right? But we're not going to say you're somebody that is disabled. Remember, we said language matters. We would say, I have a speech impediment. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Liz, you wanted to say something?
Yes, and also I think we must remember that these conditions and whether it's a learning disability and others that you can't see need to be diagnosed by a professional, and there's a number of tests and so on that you need to go through to make sure that the diagnosis is correct and that you can then get the right support. So it's very important that the medical model is followed with regard to labeling, specifically with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the second one, it says that if I have a form of deformity, but it doesn't restrict me from doing anything, is it considered a disability or it's a body deformity?
I think that questions still speak to what our colleague has just spoken to, you know, that when we speak of disability, we're not just speaking to saying I have a disability, right? We're also speaking to how it affects us, right? A little bit like mental health. And that's something we'll discuss in tomorrow's topic, that just say you may have anxiety, but when you may be diagnosed by anxiety, but some people, it doesn't limit them from living within their context, right? So again, to that disability, you may have that speech impediment, you may have that deformity. It is considered some form of a disability. However, we're also speaking to that inclusivity of how do we then integrate you into society? Is it holding you from doing things like going to your lectures, from interacting with your peers, right? So by definition, we would call it a disability. However, is it debilitating you is the real question. Thank you.
All right. Before I go to the third one, Ntate Nkuna, you wanted to say something.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I think it's important to emphasize that the slogan for persons with disabilities, which is nothing about us without us, that from time to time, whenever we want to assist them, let's find out from them on how to best accommodate them. And again, colleagues, it's important to remember that a disability can be acquired anytime by anyone. No one is safe. You may be without a disability today, but you can join the world of disability anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that input. And the next one, which is the last one, it's stuttering and photosensitivity considered a disability.
And I think that question goes hand in hand into what all the colleagues have responded to say.
Yeah.
Visually, if there's an impediment, yes. I heard photosensitivity as well as, I missed the first one.
Yes. It's stuttering and photosensitivity.
Exactly. So I think the biggest thing that our colleague has mentioned here, that the disability may exist, but your best bet is asking the person. Don't assume.
No, thank you so much for that. And then we can go to our second presentation. Thank you so much. Over to you.
So we're going to go into gender and sexual orientations. So as an icebreaker, as a thought-provoking question, if today you woke up in a different body, as a different gender, put yourself in their shoes and let us know, what gender would you be, what name would you encompass? What age would you be and what profession would you be doing? I'll wait to get a few in the chat box.
Male, still female. The other one say that I will be Bill Gates, a woman 35, old, a doctor by profession, still my male. I will be a lecturer, male, still male.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Remember the
And then
highlight
36,
was
36 years, 35 years, mid-20s, 30 years male, a billionaire like Elon Musk, and male David, neurosurgeon, 35. I will be a white male in his mid-20s. I will work in it. A male, 36 years, maybe an artisan working in the mining industry. A male, 25, psychiatrist. Male, 23. Female, Bontle, 30. Male, gynecologist. 34 and still a teacher. I will be 21 and a female and a psychologist.
Okay.
Yes, I'm 37. I will be a HR management lecturer and also a business consultant.
Okay.
Still female, 35, professor, curriculum developer, blank this side. Female, 25, social worker. Male, 45, a taxi owner. Male, 40 years, psychologist. I will be a man by the name of Ulutando and 25, and I will be a clinical psychologist. Male, Ayanda, 28, advocate. I will be a male personal trainer by profession. Age 26, name probably Dominic. Still male, 28 will be the next Elon Musk. Profession, mathematician. I will be living in South Korea.
Okay.
I can be a male 25, a politician. Female 30 years working in the medical industry. This one is non-binary, range 30, therapist. Still female, still Ayanda. 27 years, female public health specialist. The other one is saying, how about remaining a child? Female, still my name, Poppy, 30, president. Sure. Male, psychologist advocating for mental health issues. Female, Lerato, 28, psychologist. Female, 31, clinical psychologist, final year honors in psychology. Yeah. So yeah, no, I think we can continue now. Yeah.
Okay. Those were very interesting. Thank you for that. And those that said they would remain the same gender, one, I'd like to highlight we're not listening to instructions. But two, highlighting that really in this moment where I'm about to unpack, just think about, I'm giving you another opportunity to just silently with yourself, think about putting yourself in a different gender shoes, right? And the whole purpose of this exercise is to get us thinking outside of the box, right? To get us thinking outside of our daily norms. And that's why I've highlighted, put yourself in their shoes. And I want to know the thoughts, that some of you have. Maybe for time, we won't go through too many comments. Just a few comments to say, what are your thoughts with waking up, and others, saying non-binary, somebody who is saying they're going finally as somebody who's going to say they're waking up as the president, and somebody who's male saying I'm going to wake up female. What are the thoughts in the room? What does that tell you? What thoughts are coming up when I, Spirushe, am standing here and I'm saying, I want to wake up, well, I would wake up as a male. I would be Caucasian in my 50s, living abroad, having so many, companies, not really waking up to go to work, sitting on my balcony because I've afforded myself the life of the companies running themselves. What do you take of it as me as a human being? What does it say to you?
The other one says that it's gender roles.
Okay.
And then I'm still looking.
Does it make me any different?
If I were, the other one says, if I were a male, then my grooming time will be cut short, leaving me more time.
Okay.
This.
So it sounds like people are thinking to gender roles, okay?
Myself versus my body.
Okay. I like that comment.
The other one says, I'm not happy with who I am.
Okay.
And then the other one says, people are not happy with who they are. Will people around me accept me?
Okay.
Willing to explore other people's lives, maybe not appreciating yourself.
Okay.
If I were male, I wouldn't be forced to stay in the kitchen and clean all day. And then the other one, it says that it's a man's world. And say that you believe males are better than men. I don't know. Something like that.
Okay. So I'm hearing a lot of thoughts way outside of the box that I was even thinking too. But I think what I'm finding is that in no part of these comments did I hear somebody being less of human, right? And no part of the comments that were typed out did we hear nobody has less of rights. Nobody else is not worthy of being included, right? Which tells us that the different bodies that exist, the different genders, the different sexual orientations make us different in how we orientate ourselves, but at the end of the day, we're human, right? That means we are worthy of being included. We are worthy of being accepted, right? Even though some people spoke to not accepting, it was not about the other, it was about the them, right? Internal, which tells us we're all facing our own internal battles, right? So every now and again, the whole idea is put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Just for a moment, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. If you don't understand the context that they're coming from, take a moment, put yourself in their shoes, right? And if it is so difficult to put yourself in their shoes, go into your shoes and think about it from the next person, right? That you're going through your own internal battles, but that doesn't dehumanize you. So who are we to stand and dehumanize those of a different community? So in essence, we're saying that our sex, our gender, our orientation, whatever we are, will always be different from the next person, but we belong equally as the next person. And these are things that we see on our campuses, people expressing themselves a little bit differently, and we exclude and we sideline. And that speaks to some form of gender-based violence, right? We know that these things happen on our campuses. The talks are there, whether it's social media and how they influence our daily being in our everyday, right? I want us to slip straight into gender-based violence. I think I saw the talks already before the session started in terms of what the definition is, right? When we speak to gender-based violence, we speak again to this umbrella term of any harmful act, right? I should have highlighted the any. We're speaking to any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person without their consent. So if you're going to do anything harmful to somebody against their will, so you haven't asked for their consent and it is a harmful act, this is what we call gender-based violence. And another addition that is very important, that it is that it is based on socially ascribed gender differences. So usually or typically is described between the genders male and female. And what we're saying here, we're not saying gender-based violence is when a man does a harmful act to a woman, right? We are done with that view, right? That is past historical view. We're speaking to female and male, to binary individuals, a binary and a heterosexual, a non-binary and a male, a non-binary and a female. So we're speaking to that socially ascribed gender that you are, right? Us having differences and doing a harmful act without the consent. Right? And gender-based violence is viewed as a global phenomenon, and it is a widespread violation of human rights. We know as we're sitting here every day, how many times do we turn on the radio, turn on our social medias, walk on campus, and we hear about this widespread violation of human rights? Almost every day, right? And there's a significant impact on our physical, psychological, sexual, and reproductive health. And that is something that we will go a little bit in depth as I continue with the presentation. Now let's look at where it's kind of stemming from. So the gender inequalities and patriarchy, right? So gender-based violence is enriched in our culture and our societies and is reinforced by the power and powered by patriarchy. So let's think to back then, right? When we speak to patriarchy, it is about that social relation of power. It is the system that maintains either class, either gender, racial, and heterosexual privileges, right? So it is rooted, history of gender-based violence. This is the fact, it is rooted in those patriarchal imbalances, right? And when we look at gender-based violence, it is one of the most pronounced expressions of unequal power relations between men and women. Right? And we need to remember, when I speak to men and women, I'm not encompassing to say it is only inflicted by a man on a woman. We're saying women and men as well. We're speaking to both genders. Right? And when we speak to patriarchy, it is this, sexist view that legitimizes violence to ensure superiority of men. And we know that patriarchy, or rather our past imbalances, are out the window. So it also legitimizes violence to ensure the superiority of women. So when we speak to doing unto the other, right? So we're saying that patriarchy and sexist views would give men power, but we're doing it back, right? We're trying to get women power back. And what are we doing? Inflicting that gender inequality back. And in essence is the essence that is of gender-based violence, right? We also look at the religious and cultural traditions that are frequently characterized by unequal power relations between male dominations. But this is still a fact, right? We're saying our religions, our cultural backgrounds kind of teach us these ways of knowing and doing, right? We grow up in households where we know that a man is seen as the breadwinner and the woman is seen as, one to do the childbearing, to do the child nurturing and house care, right? And we want to go out into society and re-inflict those. And this is what we speak to when we speak to the gender inequality and patriarchy, right? Also, lack of economic resources make women particularly vulnerable to violence, right? So that idea that I can't even get that job, so I will be stuck to those patriarchal views, right? That say I should stay home as a woman and do the childbearing work, right? We're not saying that this is what causes gender-based violence. We're saying that it makes it more vulnerable and more susceptible. And even if we turn the roles backwards to say, in a household where a man is not able to get the job and the woman becomes the breadwinner, what are we seeing? That's susceptibility, right? But we're also speaking to gender inequality disempowers women And if they are poor, or intersectionality makes them more vulnerable. So that is the essence. And this is where we're saying it is rooted. So gender-based violence is enriched in our culture, in our society, and is reinforced by this powered dynamic of patriarchy. So in essence, what are we saying? We're saying the problems of gender-based violence in South Africa is complex, right? It's one that is both an individual problem, right, and at large a social problem. It is rooted within our country's historical and current unequal social and economic cultural relations, right? We have underlying beliefs in the supremacy of certain genders, what we've spoken to now, and it's connected in history and culture and continues to reinforce these ideals of genders and the stereotypes of us being unequal, right? And when we look to the current cultural and societal factors contributing to gender and equality in South Africa, it is compounded by, the country's historical apartheid regime, right? Normalizing violence. That in order to get power or get your point across, you need to instill violence, right? So what we're saying is that there is an imbalance of power between gender-based violence, and it will continue for as long as we hold to, the historical and current unequal social, economic, and cultural relations, as long as we hold to those stereotypes that the stereotypes that reinforce the inequality, we will continue to have this power imbalance between our genders, right? Are we all still on the same page? A thumbs up, smile, a sad face in the comments. Okay, now let's really unpack what this thing we're speaking about is. We've understood that it is this, harmful act without the consent between genders, but what are we looking to? What are the different forms of gender-based violence? We're looking to verbal, right? We're looking to non-verbal. We're using power. We're looking at using power to get sexual favors, right? We're looking at economic abuse and sexual exploitation. We're looking at psychological abuse. We're looking to, intimate partner violence and domestic violence. We're looking to physical abuse, right? So it's not just my boyfriend beat me or my husband beat me, right? We're speaking to the verbals. So this is the unwelcome pressure for either sexual activity, sexual innuendos, suggesting, comments with sexual overtones, right? If somebody's saying something that alludes to something you are unwelcome in the sexual nature, that is a form of gender-based violence. So offensive flirting, remember we're speaking to consent, right? And when you're saying these things and thinking you're joking or insulting in a manner, it is a form of gender-based violence, right? Requesting for sexual nature, sending messages, that are intimidating in a sexual manner, right? Comments and appearance about somebody's body, right? Saying things that you may perceive. So saying things like, oh, your bum might be big, or whatever the comments are, as long as that person hasn't consented and it is a harmful act, it is a form of gender-based violence, right? Now let's look at the non-verbal ones. So displaying gender-degrading material. So when you're sharing things on social media that are insinuating stereotypes or sexist language or images that are of defaming nature to another gender, unwelcoming gestures, that is a form of gender-based violence. Flashing somebody, so thinking you're just trying to be funny, where you're flashing somebody of your body parts, right? That is a form of gender-based violence. Saying sexually suggestive things or sending offensive material via my phone and you think you're funny, sending these memes, that is a form of gender-based violence. Sharing and sending pornography without consent, that forms under a non-verbal form of gender-based violence, right? And when we're looking at the use of power, so we're thinking in the context of our university setting, a lecturer wanting to reward a student for sexual advances, another student saying, you know, I can do your assignment if this is what you give me, a sexual advance. That is a form of gender-based violence. We've spoken to that, sex for marks, sex for being incorporated into my group project, right? Favoritism. So you're going to, as a leader, you're going to keep picking this student to do something for you, or as a lecturer, you're going to keep picking on that student to do something for you in light of every other student for a sexual favor. That is a form of gender-based violence. At economic and sexual exploitations, the things that we see currently in this day and age, you know, exchanging money or gifts or food, or even things like accommodation, people's basic needs and basic rights for sexual advances is a form of gender-based violence, right? When we look at the ideals and, you know, what research says about sugar daddies, right? Where does it come up? Where does it stem from? It's always in order to meet the needs, those basic human needs, in the form of money, or in the form of those needs for sexual favors, is a form of gender-based violence. Remember, the key word is without consent, right? We're looking at psychological abuse. So through our words, through our actions, you think you're saying something to be funny, to be nasty to somebody, right? Your actions and your words have repercussions, and it is a form of gender-based violence, right? Isolating a partner or a friend, locking them up, humiliating them, insulting them, right? That is a form of gender-based violence, gender-based violence. And then we're looking at intimate partner violence. This is something we see all the time where, you know, this is my partner. It couldn't have been gender-based violence. This is my husband. This is my girlfriend. This is my boyfriend, right? And this is when it is used in the form of, you know, maintaining power and control over this person in the relationship. So you can't go there. You know, you need to stay home, or you can't be going to campus all the time. You need to stay put, you know. Does your education matter over me? That is a form of gender-based violence, right? And we're also looking at things like physical abuse. Hitting somebody, forceful acts that are bodily, touching somebody, kissing somebody, you know, rage towards somebody, that is a form of gender-based violence. So all of these that we've mentioned are not limited to all the forms, but this is just to give you an idea that the little things that you may hear of and you may do are a form of gender-based violence. Remember, I'm highlighting that if the person doesn't consent to it, if it is a harmful act, if it's deemed a harmful act by the other party, it is a form of gender-based violence. Okay, and then we look at, you know, the correlations between gender-based violence, HIV and AIDS, so medical conditions, mental health, and substance abuse. There is a strong correlation between mental health issues and substance abuse and gender-based violence. If we look at substance abuse and addiction, it can contribute to development of mental health issues and vice versa. And in essence, what happens? So we're not saying here just because you abuse substances and just because you have a mental health issue, you are allowed to, or you will then develop, you know, these harmful behaviors. But we're saying there is a correlation, and it does make you more susceptible. Remember, when we're speaking to somebody who abuses substances, let's give an example like you're somebody who gets stressed and you have a few drinks, right? You have a few drinks lead to more than one leads to more than five, and you're somebody who then gets, you know, outrageous, there's rage, and you may have a partner at home or may have a partner who's a student with you, and it metastasizes into one of these that we've spoken about, right? Physical abuse, psychological abuse, asking for favors, doing the nonverbal, sending people things, right? So we're saying there is a correlation and we need to be mindful, right? If we look at GBV survivors, they are at higher risk for depression. They're at higher risk for anxiety, substance misuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide attempts. So vice versa. So we're saying the person who may be suffering has the likelihood of perpetrating, and the somebody who has been perpetrated on has a high chance of then, being somebody who then develops a mental health, somebody who develops a substance abuse issue, or then becomes the perpetrator themselves. Okay. And when we look at sexual violence on campuses in South Africa, it has been a long-standing issue. We know it. The stats in 2022, there have been 10% of all reported cases occur in institutions of higher learning. So these things are things that are there, right? We're not speaking of it just for the fun of it. These are challenges that are within, the higher learning institutions, right? 62% of students feel unsafe on campuses and are at risk of gender-based violence. These are the stats, right? And 60% of service staff and 71% of academic staff felt unsafe, right? So these are challenges that we're dealing with, on campuses. So it is up to us as individuals who are part of society, and for you who is a peer educator, to acquaint yourself with these things, to be able to go through channels of reporting, to be able to support somebody, to be able to guide somebody in terms of how do they report the case, how do they put themselves in a place of safety. All right. So let's look at the consequences of gender-based violence, right? We're speaking to the severity of this. We're not speaking to just somebody kicked and pushed me, right? We're speaking to also this happening ongoing, right? You're somebody who gets verbally abused ongoing. You're somebody who's continuously getting beaten ongoing, right? There are effects, there are consequences to this. If we look at physical, right? There could be partial or permanent disability, depending on what violent nature it was. If somebody hit you in the wrong place, if somebody pushed you downstairs, if somebody forced themselves onto you, right? It could end up in a permanent disability or a partial disability, right? It could metastasize into a chronic illness, or even worse, a mental health illness, right? It could cause organ damage, right? It could even result to the worst case scenario being death, right? And if we look to psychological, it could consequent to anger, anxiety, fear, feeling shame, your self-esteem dropping. Post-traumatic stress disorder is one of, the most prominent features of somebody who has typically gone through gender-based violence, suicidal ideation, having trouble sleeping, depression, substance use and abuse, facing social rejection and isolation within, your normal social settings or within your community. And then, the sexual and reproductive damages. So gender-based violence, say somebody has ongoing, repeatedly raped you, or even it happening once, does put you at a risk of, engaging in sexual and risky behavior. For those who are survivors of childhood sexual abuse, right? It has made you susceptible to early sexual experience, desires, and unprotected sex, right? Could lead to some pregnancies. It could lead to things like people wanting to have abortions. It could lead to bad pregnancy outcomes. Maybe you did decide to keep this baby, but maybe it was implanted in the wrong place, right, in the fallopian tubes, and now you're sitting with this reproductive damage. It could metastasize into, infertility issues, HIV and AIDS transfer, sexually transmitted diseases, right? These are the real living consequences of gender-based violence. Okay, and this is something that we had highlighted in terms of, the contributing factors and consequences of gender-based violence. We're not saying that, once these are there, in essence, these factors make it more favorable for gender-based violence to happen. Not that if you are in poverty and if you have inadequate care for lack of information, then puts you susceptible. We're saying that these consequences and contributing factors make it more favorable for gender-based violence to occur, right? And these factors are not causing violence as a justification for violence, right? Understanding these factors will help us spot and deal with effective violence within our communities. And knowing these facts and how they're related to one another are important steps to understanding gender-based violence. Remember, we cannot call out on something that we are uncertain of or don't know of, right? So like we're here today, we're here to create, awareness around this topic. We're here to create, thinking outside of the box, thinking about things from the context of somebody else. Remember, I mentioned, for a moment, put yourself in their shoes, right? So you're here to, in essence, absorb the knowledge, decode it, make meaning of, and create the awareness within your communities. Okay, so let's look back at contributing factors and consequences, right? So if we look at in society, so things like poverty, things like masculinity, masculinity features of feeling less of like a man, is linked to, that need for aggression or either that need for dominance, our criminal and our justice system, right? It doesn't favor us, it may instill these ideas that, if that person didn't get caught, then I can get away with it, right? That idea of perpetrators not being persecuted, right? Victims feeling like, if I report this case, where is it going to go? And these are real life consequences, right? The availability of these small firearms, so, things that people can easily get access to inflict gender-based violence. This is a problem that we face in our society and within our communities. Let's look at the high unemployment rate. What is that doing? It's putting a lot of time in our hands. The high population density, right? There's quite a lot of people. People feel like they have access to people. People feel like they can invade on people's rights, invade on people's privacy, invade on people's consent, right? Lack of information is something in the community. Lack of knowing that, things like getting sexual innuendos or sexual favors is a form of gender-based violence, right? Our schools not speaking enough about it. Our community is not speaking enough about it, Poor safety in our public spaces, are the consequences, or rather the contributing factors to cases of gender-based violence. If we look at relationships, if we're looking at that susceptibility to people who are within family dysfunction, right? So in my family, I'm used to this. This is something that I see, I learn to knowing, and I learn to doing. And this is what we had spoken about in the early parts of the presentation, to say, our societies, our cultures that we have been groomed in, in our upbringing, make it more favorable for us to think about these things in an okay manner. Poor parenting practices, poor conflict resolution within families, that idea that women may be the friction over women's empowerment, right? Rubbing somebody up the wrong way, and in essence, then they want to perpetrate, right? Feeling like it's happening to them all over again. So patriarchal system, and the apartheid and, living in our past imbalances. And then if we look at on the individual, so our family history of violence, witnessing gender-based violence, being a survivor of gender-based violence, being a survivor of child neglect and abuse, lack of sufficient livelihood and personal income, it gets the mind wondering, how can I do better for myself? If I don't have a good education background, I don't have the qualifications, what can I do, right? People don't think about being creative and being out of the box. People think, I can take, if I don't have, then I must take, right? These are factors that make it more favorable for gender-based violence to happen. Are we still good?
Yes, we are.
We're still good. Okay. All right. If we look at gender-based violence in the context of our campuses and the reality, if we're looking at the stats, it's saying that 10% of reported cases are from higher education, right? This is something I had highlighted to in the earlier slide. And this is a reality that 1 in 3 girls are raped before the age of 21, right? The stats do say that the intimate partner violence is the most common form of violence experienced by South African women within the higher education system, right? And the stat is bumping it to say that 62% of students feel unsafe on campuses and says that they are at high risk of gender-based violence. And this is a reality on our campuses, right? Essence, this conversation is to create awareness and get you thinking. I cannot stress it enough. It's getting you thinking outside of the box, right? But how do we encourage, the awareness of this in our communities? How do we encourage and promote this safety? How do we bring the awareness to, intimate partner violence? Because this is the most common form of violence within the institution. This is the most reported. When we're sitting in our offices and students are coming, this is what we're speaking to. This is what we're sitting with, where students aren't aware, that, hey, this is my partner, I know him so well. Surely that couldn't be a harmful act on me. Surely, he didn't know what was happening. That excusing behavior. How do we bring it to the awareness to the community to say, these things are real and intimate partner violence is a real thing? If we look at the continuum of intimate partner violence, remember, when we speak to a continuum, this is something we'll also speak to tomorrow when we speak about mental health. When we speak to a continuum, we speak to something that looks like a slope, right? So think of your graph, where you go from extreme bad to extreme good, right? And when we speak of a continuum, we speak to being able to go from bad to good to in between. And that's what it looks like, right? It starts at, where we kind of call it in the green area. It starts with that name calling, labeling the faults in our partners, repeated humiliation, where you feel like, okay, these are challenges of a relationship, right? This happens, right? And then it migrates to, what we call the yellow stage, where, the alarm is starting to be set off, right? And we're speaking to controlling and manipulation, right? So playing mind games with you, telling partners lies that contradicts, not allowing the partner to make their own decisions, where you feel like, you're mine, this is our thing, this is, we're in this relationship together, that sense of manipulation. That's when, that bell starts to ring, that, something might be going wrong. Then maybe migrating to the orange stage, so isolating, where, your partner starts removing you from your family and friends and feels like, you're better off isolated so that they can, get their point across and that you're their only voice of reason, right? manipulating others against your partner, so making it feel like, you know, she or he's not choosing going out with you or hanging out with you guys anymore. They're choosing to you know, stay with them. But in hindsight, it's them removing you from, you know, your family and friends.
Miss
Yes.
Matabula, thank you for please accept my apology for disturbing you. Can I request, I want to address this because this is also something that can trigger some students that they have faced the GBVF. So can I request the student, Albert, can you please leave the platform? Albert, can you please leave the platform? And please, students, do not respond to that. Let's concentrate on the presentation that we have been enjoying. And I'll also ask David to assist us to remove him from the platform. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, are we good to go?
Yes, please.
All right, we were speaking on isolating, right? Where you start being deprived of things that you are used to in your individual capacity, right? And then we slide down that continuum towards, you know, threatening acts. You know, they start to threaten violence on either your family, your friends, your loved ones, your children, right? Threats of harming you, you know, if you leave me, I'm going to jump. If you leave me, I'm going to kill you, or if you leave me, I'm going to kill myself, right? That threatening nature, which then migrates to, you know, that really violent zone where the actual suicide happens, where you actually start getting hit or harmed, you know, homicide, somebody ending in death, you know, punching things, showing that true violent aggression, right? So when we speak to that intimate partner violence, we speak to this slippery slope, where sometimes it can be violent and then it can quickly migrate to seeming like it's a little bit cooler where you're isolating, and then it can go to threatening, and then it can just go back to insulting, right? So we need to be mindful of where we are on the continuum and where we need to intercept and get the assistance that we need, right? In essence, that block is very important. That's a big NB. I should have had a big star there to say, you know, this continuum indicates that without change, you know, the ultimate result of ongoing emotional and psychological abuse can be lethal. So the idea is that the minute we start to see the bells ring, we need to intercept and get the assistance that is needed, right? We don't have to wait for the continuum to get to violent, right? Okay. And when we look at, you know, that idea that, you know, waiting for it to get to the violence, you know, waiting for it to be too late, it speaks to that low reporting rate on, you know, gender-based violence incidents. And the stats show this and say, you know, among respondents who have experienced gender-based violence, only 13% report, right? And if we're looking at a stat of 100% of a population, only 30% is almost nothing, right? And it further goes to say, you know, almost half of the victims explained that they felt uncertain whether the behavior was serious enough to disclose or report, right? So it speaks to that awareness that we may sit in positions where we aren't sure whether this could be characterized as gender-based violence, right? And we need to go back to that definition to say, excuse me, was this a harmful act without my consent between two genders, right? And if you answer yes, 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 the likelihood is that there's a big red flashing bell, right? Another frequent reason indicates that 31%, sorry, of victims is that the time of the incident, they did not identify the behavior and act as violence, right? So in that moment, you are getting beat up or you are being insulted or, right? And in that moment, you weren't aware of it. But the minute somebody, you share this or disclose it with somebody, they're able to make sense of it. They're able to educate you that this may have been a form of gender-based violence. Right? So if we look further into reasons for not reporting, there's that fear of secondary victimization. And when we speak to secondary victimization, is I report it and then you make me feel like, oh, that was just a slap on the wrist. There's other people who feel worse, right? Or that embarrassment or that shame that people carry, that how could I have been with somebody who claimed to have loved me, or how could I have been friends with somebody to claim to be my friend, right? Or that fear of not being believed. And we know this is one that really exists within our society, that who's going to believe me, right? There's so many reported cases, but who's going to believe me, right? Fear of hurting the alleged perpetrator, either their wife, their friends, their family. So being an empath to the point where you're caring about the next person and forgetting about your needs as the individual, right? Feeling like there's no witness to come and give evidence, or feeling like there's no physical evidence that can show that this person did verbally abuse me, right? The messages have been deleted. I can't prove and show that this person has actually said to me, right? Or feeling like there's nowhere to report. This incident has happened and I actually have nowhere to go. I have no idea who to go to, right? It's that idea that, I can tell a friend, I can tell, but who am I going to take it? Who's the higher authority that I take it to, right? And not trusting the place where you're reporting. These are actual reasons that people feel it's better not to speak up than to. Not wanting to expose, one's identity, fear that it won't be kept confidential, right? Feeling that reporting that may be, some sort of reprisal by the accused, and that they may harm you further. So if I report it and they find out, they might come back, to harm me even further. These are real life cases and scenarios, or rather facts, of why individuals feel I'd rather not report, right? And when we're sitting in the capacity of peer educators, how are we thinking outside of the box to say, if there is a student that comes to me in confidence and goes, I want this matter to be kept confidential, but this is what has happened, right? And there's that duty thereof to keep it confidential, right? If somebody comes to you and doesn't want to expose their identity, who are we to then fight to know who the person is? It's to listen to the story, right? And that's the duty that we hold. And I think really highlighting that, everyone needs to understand the idea of consent. There's usually that back when somebody's reporting that, did you consent to this? How do you know that you didn't consent, but the person consented and withdrew, right? No one is confused or ill-informed regarding to what real consent is, consent is. It includes the ideas that consent can be given if a person is not fully conscious, or if under the threat or force of intimidation and false presence of fraud used. Right? Ideas around both parties to sexual activities are responsible to ascertain if there is free consent without coercion. So if somebody is under the influence of whatever substance it is, and you are uncertain whether they're saying no or yes, we take the high road to say maybe that person then is not consenting, right? Consent for one instance does not mean consent for others, and past and present and future contexts, right? If the person consented today, that doesn't mean next week when you're trying something, that also means yes, right? And that idea that I don't know whether they were shaking their head, saying, nodding yes, but saying no. We take what we verbally hear, right? In simplicity, no definitely means no, right? Consent must be explicit. If it's a yes, you mustn't be confused whether the person was saying yes, was saying no. A yes is very explicit and a no is very explicit, right? Unequal power relations weakens that ability to consent, right? So you're sitting in a position of power, you are a peer educator, you are a lecturer, you are an SRC member, and this person, you're asking them to consent something, and they're not sure whether they can say yes or no, right? So when you consent and then you withdraw, take the one that is overt and explicit, where I withdrew and I said, I no longer consent, right? Succumbing and giving up doesn't mean this person now consented. Remember, consent is explicit, right? And maybe is not consent. It's either an explicit no or explicit yes. And if a or a is uncertain, we take that as a no, because a yes will be explicit. I cannot stress that enough. Hey, we'll look at, the belief systems, the myths that exist. When a person wants to have sex, they must have sex. This is a myth. It is not possible for a man to rape his wife or for a wife to rape their husband, right? This is a myth. Most people in romantic relationships say no when they really mean yes. That's what we've spoken to. It is an explicit thing. Asking somebody, a yes or no question is always explicit. If they go maybe, we're not going to take it as a yes. But if they go yes, we take it as a yes. If they say no, and it maybe tells you that there's some sort of uncertainty, right? And that myth that exists, that in some cultures, violence is an expression of a person's love, right? So I'll put it in vernacular and translate it into English. Kuti makakuthanda uzokushaya, right? If they hit you, it shows you that they love you, right? And this is a myth belief system. And that myth that believes that lies around victims of abuse can leave a violent relationship if they want to. Remember, we've spoken to that continuum. That what happens next? We don't know what's happening next. So who are we to go? You can leave if you want to, right? But if we look on the contrary to the truths, we're looking at how violence is used to control people and get one's own way, right? In that moment where you're not sure whether it's a yes or no, in essence, if you take it as a yes, you've gone with what you wanted, right? To get your own way. Men, just like women, do have impulse control and therefore can control their sexual urges. That answers that first myth, to say if somebody wants to have sex now, they can do it now, right? We're humans and we can control our impulses. When a man cannot have sex when he wants it, nothing will be injured or damaged, right? Nothing. That myth doesn't exist, that he needs to have it now, otherwise he will die. Or these funny concepts of, it will injure his manlyhood. That doesn't exist, right? That idea that rape refers to sex without consent, whether it is committed by a husband or any other man or any other woman, right? For the mere fact that there is no consent speaks to gender-based violence, right? The idea that rape is a criminal offense, whether it is committed by a man on his wife, by a girlfriend on his boyfriend, right? It is a criminal offense and it is a form of gender-based violence. When a woman says no, they mean it, and when men must respect this. And when men say no, they mean it, and women must respect this. Sorry for that typo. Right? These are the actual truths. So we don't need to stereotype and stigmatize this idea that, you know, if you're uncertain, just do it for, the other person. Be an empath towards yourself. Remember, we said put yourself in the other person's shoes. Think before we act. Right? Other truths. Violence is never about love, and the dependency and that need for control. Right? This is a truth. Love is about, feeling care, feeling a sense of togetherness, and not a sense of violence. Violence is a crime that should not be justified or rationalized. We're not going to see whether it was too much or too little. If it was a violent act and a violent crime, that's exactly what it was. Right? And us remembering that it isn't easy, we're speaking to that myth that it isn't easy to leave a violent relationship. And there are many reasons why it's difficult for a person to do this, right? So somebody coming to report to you, we're not going to re-traumatize and re-victimize them by saying, but you can just leave, right? There are reasons around having nowhere else to go. This is somebody you live with. This is somebody you're renting out a flat with. Where are you going to go? Where do you expect the person to go? Financial dependency, right? This person's paying for your studies. This person is how you survive, your bread and butter, right? They're the head of the household. Being afraid of that social stigma. Maybe you're a married couple, right? Maybe you're engaged. Maybe you've come out to the public to say, we've posted on social media, we're together. And next thing you need to speak to, leaving this relationship. There is that fear, right? It does exist. Being afraid that your partner might come for your family, your children, your friends, right? These are real life scenarios. Let's look at, whistleblowing. That idea that everybody should really be free to report any case or incident of gender-based violence and can bring it to the attention of somebody who is in a position to assist, right? This is without the fear of victimization, fear of, penalization, fear of coming forward. Anyone who is in the capacity to report is free to do so. Number 2, the individual must be protected at all costs. We need to ensure we do no harm. Otherwise, we are facing re-victimization. All reports of, a whistleblower or somebody who has experienced the incident must be taken seriously and be investigated. It doesn't help for us to bring it to the awareness of society. And then when somebody reports it, it's put at the bottom of the stack or never really comes to the top of the stack, right? It must be taken seriously. Establishing that clear line. Okay, a student reports to me as a peer educator. A student reports, what do I do next? How do I escalate it? Right? So who do I refer to in this instance? Also remembering that autonomy is very important. You allow the person to tell their story and make their own decisions, right? Allowing that protection, allowing them to do so in their own right, in their own capacity. So to depict it in a nice and a clear way in terms of what approach to take is that confidentiality is important. Firstly, when somebody reports, confidentiality is important. you need to consider that you could be the first line responder. You could be the first person they're able to, you know, express themselves to. Autonomy, allowing them the right to make their own decision, right? And keeping them anonymous. Sometimes those that report, remember we've spoken to the facts of fears of reporting, feel like if they know who I am, then everyone is going to be in panic or they're going to come for me, right? So keeping it confidential, keeping their autonomy in check, and keeping it anonymous, right? And remember, the person who is reporting can withdraw at any point. You're not going to sit with the information to say, you told me, I'm escalating it. Remember, we spoke to autonomy, right? You allow them to be autonomous and take supportive and protective measures can be provided to the person reporting, so to that student that's reporting. And the biggest thing that I can give as a take home for this approach is to say, you know, inform them of everything that they can do. So give them all the coping strategies, give them all the solutions, not solutions, the steps that they can take, the approaches to the manner, and allow them to be autonomous. And I think with about 30 minutes remaining, we'll see if there's questions. That's it from me today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Matsibula, and thank you for the presentation. And I just want to read some of the comments that we made by our students. It says, nice engagement, and we really appreciate. I hope everyone will enjoy volunteering community outreach through this initiative and productive program. And the second one, it says that, thank you, ma'am, for simplifying an explanation. And then the other one say that I've learned a lot today and thank you so much, and also for the explanation. They really appreciate it, and thank you for that. And then I think what I've noticed is that while you were presenting, there were a lot of engagement that they were happening, and then also responding to the questions, and then also checking, and they were correct and spot on. And then others, they were already ahead of you. And then when you came to the next slide, you were answering what they have asked. So there's a lot of engagement that it's happening. And then also the other students saying that overall, inspired by our chats, we are going to be a great future peer educators, guys. And I totally agree with you, especially I've been monitoring the response that you have been providing, and also appreciating the presentation that you shared with us. So at this moment, I don't think you have any questions. Let me check, because they say that, wow, it was very informative, very informative. Thank you so much. I can't wait to be a peer educator. Thank you so much. They really appreciate it. And then also, yes, List, I've noted you. And then also I want to say that while I was going through the chat, I know that some students are triggered by the topic that was discussed today. And if you feel that you want to debrief, please send me an email so that I can have a discussion with you in Meloro so that we can assist you. Don't hesitate to send us an email on Students First. I saw that. And please remember that we are here for you as Unisa and Higher Health. Over to you, Lizette.
Thank you, Memangophe and Chair of the session. I think I want to thank the presenter and say it was a fantastic presentation. And we are so privileged to have the caliber of yourself through Higher Health to support us. And I honestly feel we are blessed tonight to have you on the platform. And the peer educators that responded and the team that supported, it's absolutely amazing. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Melly. We really appreciate that, the feedback from you. And also they are saying that please share the presentation with us. We will definitely do that, because I see that it's you still want to read more on it. Remember that you can also check the recording, so that if you have missed anything, then you can send an email to us. And on that note, I want to say thank you to colleagues from Unisa, colleagues from Higher Health. Thank you so much for providing this platform for us, and to our Deputy Director Meliro for always being here for us and supporting us. Ntate Nkuna, the engine Mendlovu, thank you so much. And in absentia to our Dean of Students, who is always supporting, and most importantly to you, the students of Unisa, who raised their hands when we said that, who can we send? And you said, we are here, we are ready to be the peer educators. We are ready to assist the students that they are having the challenges that we see every day, and they don't know where to go. As this, our Dean of Students said, that we have 400,000 students with 10,000 staff members. So with your support and raising your hands, we are able to reach to many students, and with the platform like that, thank you so much to our colleagues from Higher Health, our colleagues from Unisa, for making this possible. So tomorrow we are continue, and I will check, please, if there's anything that you need, send us an email, drop the chat. We are here to support you, as I've indicated that it's us, Unisa, and Higher Health to provide you with the support. Thank you so much. And the meeting and the training is urgent. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you tomorrow at 6.
Goodbye, everybody.